Hello there, welcome to the English Language Club. It's Tuesday, so it's time for our weekly Hangout meeting, live stream. I am Colin Munro, and this is Tony Culper. Tony, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Oh, doing good, yeah, not too bad. Getting close to Christmas, so I'm getting very, very busy with things.
Oh, yeah.
But it's always good to talk to you every week and everyone else who's here. We've got 12 people watching us so far. So we've got Lolly, Diego from Colombia. Those are the only people who've made a comment yet so far. So if you are watching, please say hi. Let us know where you're from. And importantly, if you have a question about English, about learning English, let us know in the comments, because that's what we're here for. That's what we do in these sessions. If you are watching for the first time, you're very, very welcome. And yes, just so you know, we just sit here and answer the questions that you have for us about learning English. So if we don't get any questions, it'll be a quick show. But yeah, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, it's getting close to Christmas, so be interesting to talk about that. How are your preparations for Christmas going, Tony?
Oh, our own preparations. Well, we put up a Christmas tree and decorated it, and put up stockings over the fireplace. Put up a few lights just indoors. We didn't put any lights up outdoors, though most people do put lights on the outside of their houses. But we've enjoyed walking around in the communities near us and looking at the lights that other people have put up.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so you say most people put lights on the outside of their house?
Well, most people who put up lights, but I'd say, yeah, like depending on the community, right? But most people will put lights up. Not all. Some of them will do it right at the beginning of December.
Here in the UK, some people put lights up on their house, like a good number, maybe, but not. I mean, like maybe 5% of people, 1 in 20.
Oh, really? Even in like suburbs, like small communities.
I mean, maybe it's different in other areas that I'm not so familiar with, but yeah. In fact, saying that, there is one village near where my parents live that is actually quite famous for having all the houses have Christmas lights, and in fact, people just make visits just to drive down that street or that drive through that village just to look at the Christmas lights. But that's an unusual village. I think in most places, in most neighborhoods, you'll get one person who's super enthusiastic about it and puts up lots of lights, and most people, maybe some people put a reindeer out or something like that, but other than that, not much.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got a few people a few more people. We've got Susanta's here. Jack Darby, he's got a question about the basics of learning English. Let's see. Here we are. Just says, what the basics about learning a new language. So not just English, but learning a new language in general. You got any comments about that?
Well, one of the things that we get asked a lot about is the relative importance of pronunciation and grammar. But regardless of how, whether you emphasize one or the other, those are very important things to understand a language, right? The basics of how a sentence is put together, right? Does the verb come first? Does the subject come first? Do you put the subject and the object before or after the verb? So those basics, like how to form a sentence, is really important. Pronunciation, like how to pronounce all of the sounds in that language, like whether you're learning the alphabet or you're learning a tonal language or something like that. And then in vocabulary, I've always been told it's important to emphasize verbs in your vocabulary, because nouns, you can point for nouns, but verbs are actions, and so some actions it's more difficult or more awkward to try to act it out. So yeah, that's what I'd say. The very basics. Start with pronouns are very important.
Yeah, and I think that the process of learning, I've talked about this before. There's a process of learning a language that I noticed in my own language learning experience with Spanish, of like there's sort of 3 steps. Well, at first you don't really understand anything, and nothing means anything. and then perhaps you have you start having lessons or something, and you start learning something somehow, whether it's lessons or just looking words up in a dictionary or anything, and then you start to hear those words that you've learned, and then you get to the point where you understand just about enough. Maybe it's only one or two words in a sentence that you can kind of guess the rest, or make logical assumptions about the rest. And oftentimes you'll be wrong, but that's a process, but yeah, that the process is you learn something academically, I'll say, and then you start to hear it, and then that gives you the confidence to start using it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's useful to be aware of that process.
Definitely, and I would even say, in fact, in some like linguists, they consider this a definition of a language. You can't learn a language, the real language, just by studying. You have to get out there and use it, and you have to get out there and speak to people who speak that language, especially if at all possible, to find people who speak that language as a first language, because languages are not like a subject. You can learn chemistry from a book or in a lab by yourself experimenting, but the way our brains work, languages are about communicating with other people, not sitting in a room and reading a book.
Yeah, so it takes a bit of back and forth. You have to learn a bit and then apply it, and then learn a bit more and apply it. I guess it's a bit like riding a bike. Maybe it takes some time to get the feel for it.
I mean, it's probably most similar to like social cues, like learning to be a public speaker, or learning to be able to be comfortable at a party or making a phone call, because language is a social thing in our brains. Yeah, it's not just an action, it's an action that only works with other people.
Yeah. Okay. Another comment here from Jack. He says, will you do any Christmas special? Now that's a really good opportunity to talk about what our plans are. So we've got this new course which we're launching at the beginning of January. So really we're focusing on January to do lots and lots of specials. It won't just be one special. It's going to be something. We're hoping we can do something every day during January, which is going to be awesome. As for a Christmas special, I don't know. Maybe. We are
due for a Christmas special.
Yeah, I mean, other than wear hats or something.
I don't think I have a Christmas hat.
Yeah, I mean, but we are hoping we will carry on doing these every Tuesday. We've quickly checked our calendars just before this live stream, and it looks like we will both be free for all of the Tuesdays throughout the holiday period. So maybe the closest one we'll do something Christmas themed, maybe. We could sing a Christmas carol or something. Yeah, okay. So Susanna's got a question here. She says, I wish I didn't have to work tomorrow, or I wish I would not have to work tomorrow. Which is correct? I wish I didn't have to work, or I wish I would not have to work. So I wish I didn't have to work is correct. Definitely.
And it's very common. That I think would be definitely the right way to say it, in that's how people would say it.
Yeah. Now I wish I wouldn't have to work. That isn't. I was just trying to think. Could that work? And it's not. That's not right. But why is that right? Why is that not right, Tony?
I think it just means something different. You're there. Yeah. You're not so much talking about whether or not you're working. You wish that you didn't have a need to work.
Yeah. And we've talked about how would is used
for a hypothetical.
For a sort of hypothetical. I wouldn't do that if I was you, but I'm not you. I'm talking hypothetically. Right. If I was you, I wouldn't do that. So because you're talking about a real thing tomorrow, and I guess also because would is the past tense of will, so it's a bit confusing. You're talking about tomorrow, but then you're using a past tense. So
Yeah,
Now, tenses, you can do that with
you can
tenses.
do that. Yes, it does happen.
Sometimes, but in this case, it's not quite right.
Yeah, the issue here is what Colin's pointing out, that this work tomorrow is not an imaginary thing. It's a real thing. So you say do or did instead of would or wouldn't, right? If you're using would or wouldn't here, you're saying that, you know, this future where you have to work or don't have to work is imaginary. So if you say something like, I wish I would never have to work again, right? That's more of an imaginary future, right?
Yeah. Now, actually, the whole past tense thing is actually because the sentence "I didn't have to work tomorrow," that's doing the same thing, because did is the past tense of do, and that is okay.
I mean, they're both somewhat of a hypothetical situation, right?
Because you do have to work tomorrow.
Whereas if you're talking about an actual situation, I hope I don't have to work tomorrow, because you're expecting some future thing that maybe you'll get out of work somehow, right? Then you wouldn't use the past, because that the past tense tends to be used for these imaginary things, like not the real situation. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We talked about it a lot, but the answer is I didn't have to work. I wish I didn't. That's the way you would say it in virtually every situation.
Okay, Amalia Aguilar says, hello teachers, good morning. Teacher Amalia from Panama City, Instituto America High School. So hello to everyone there at the Instituto America High School.
Yes.
Looks like Jack and AK have realized they're in the same state in Kerala. That's great. Maybe you can meet up and practice English. Let's see. Let's see.
Just want to say to Amelia, yes, I've been to Panama City and it was wonderful. It was the first Spanish-speaking place that I ever visited, and we got to see the canal and go into some of the historical districts. It was beautiful. I would love to be able to go back sometime. So I'm a little envious. It's a wonderful place.
Great. We've got a few comments then from Susanta that we can talk about.
We've got Susanta's questions.
So what does the phrase name and shame mean? What does it mean to name and shame?
Oh boy. So this is referencing something very specific, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more general. So to name and shame means when you feel that something is being done wrong, you say who is doing it. And by revealing who is doing it and talking about that person, you're intentionally trying to, make sure that they get blamed for something, and that they get that people know it was their fault, or that they did something bad. So it's name and shame is basically the same as tattling, right? Like you say who did something, but not just because you want justice to be done, but because you want that person to be in trouble. Does that make sense? Do I need to explain that a different way?
No, that's okay. Good. So, but really, it's just an expression because the two words rhyme. So it's a name and shame. That's why it's become an idiom, I suppose.
Well, because this is a very common thing that people want to denounce someone, right? And so it's an idiom just because it rhymes, but the concept exists. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we got another one from Susanta as well. She says, what does the word prosecutor mean in legal terms?
This actually might be something that is very slightly different, because legal terms for the person, individual people involved, tend to be very different in the British system and Canadian system versus the American system.
And lots of systems all around the world will be.
Well, they tend to be based, if they're using the English words for these, they tend to either going to be based on the French system or the English system, the British system, or the American system, which did things a little bit differently. So I don't know. In U.S. English, a prosecutor is the lawyer whose job it is to handle the case against someone. So if there's a criminal, the prosecutors are the ones who are trying to argue that that criminal is guilty. And usually the prosecutor is a government position, because only the government can prosecute a crime, right? There's not a prosecutor if you're like in court to sue someone or in court to get a divorce or something like that. Only if there's a crime and the government is charging you with something. Is it the same?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not big on legal terms and things, but yes, I believe that's how I understand it. A prosecutor is like the lawyer, or the in England we call lawyers solicitors.
Yeah.
So yeah, the lawyer or solicitor who is working on the side of the government, or the law basically.
The law.
Yeah.
For a criminal case.
Yeah.
In fact, this comes from the word to prosecute, the verb to prosecute, which it doesn't just mean like within criminal, but it means to bring a case against someone. But for some reason within the legal system, a prosecutor is only used, is only what they call the lawyer or the solicitor when the government is charging someone in a criminal case. It's a bit specific.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few more from Susanna coming up in a minute, but first we've got one from Alex. He says, "Hello, can you please explain the difference between these two sounds? So, and eh. Is that eh? Yeah. Which one is represented in RP?" Now, the first one that you've written as I pronounced as is on the phonetic chart that we use. That we use, it would have the two dots next to it. Now, I believe it may be a sound without the two dots as well, but the reason that we don't use that on the chart is because it's not really a sound that's used in the English language so much. So yeah, the first sound is so it's a longer sound. That's what the two dots normally mean. And the second sound is eh, which is as in hello, the eh in hello, whereas the would be. Can you think of an example of it's not like mother, because normally we would just say that as mother, so it's just a
Is could? No, not quite. Is it?
What could?
Could, yeah.
No, like a third, like what?
Third,
first, second,
yeah.
third. So that's third. Yeah. Okay. Another one from Susanna. What does by implication mean? By implication. So Susanna's obviously been reading or watching some legal cases or something, because everything is because naming and shaming and is sort of in the legal realm.
These definitely are things that show up in news programs when you talk different things. An implication is, I mean, this is a bit of an odd one. So when you say something that's implied, you didn't outright say it, but you hinted at it. But it's not just hinting. Implied means you said it, but you didn't say the words. So if I said, for instance, so someone else in this stream lives in the UK. I'm not going to say who it is, but someone else other than me in this stream lives in the UK. I didn't say that Colin lives in the UK, but he's the only other person in the stream. So I said it by implication, right?
Right.
Yeah. So by implication means that you did convey that information in whatever you said or did, but you didn't come out right and say it in so many words.
Yeah. And so that implication is from the verb, or it's linked to the verb to imply. So to imply is to sort of, like you just said, say something without actually saying it overtly.
Except that imply means a lot of different things that by implication doesn't, because imply also means to say something that it directly leads from something else, like logically, and things like that, and other things that when you use the phrase by implication, you're not really talking about. So yeah, the verb imply is a lot more complicated than this phrase, but that is where it comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so quick question here from Amalia, who says, "What is the best lesson plan today? How can I do my classes more interactive?" Now, are you a teacher, Amalia?
So yes, she said she was a teacher at Instituto America in Town
Yeah.
City.
Yeah. So Tony, you've probably got more experience than me actually teaching classes. So I've mostly taught adults, and I've done a lot of like one-on-one classes, rather than teaching in a school. So what would be your tips on teaching in a school?
Yeah, so I mean, I assume you're teaching English to people who are speaking Spanish, right? Interactive language is the best for making things interactive because, again, nothing in language is meant to be done by reading a book or watching a movie. It's meant to be done by talking to people. And
Nothing's
so
more interactive than talking to someone. Yeah.
nothing is
And
more
listening.
interactive, yes, than talking and listening, right? The key is getting them to, first of all, actually help as opposed to make things worse for each other. Because if you have people working in pairs and neither of them knows how to pronounce that word correctly, then they're not going to help each other. And two, keeping them engaged and interested, instead of, if you let everyone go into group work, they're likely to try to find ways to get out of their work, right? So those are the keys there. It's really about turning every activity, like if you're learning a phrase or you're learning a grammar concept, give them a worksheet, and instead of have them fill it out individually, have them orally give it to the other. Give the worksheet to only one student and have them ask the questions, and the other person has to answer, and then they write it down. They ask that question, the other person answers it, and they write it down. Sorry, did you lose me? Well, maybe we lost you, Colin.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I think maybe we lost you.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're back. We're back.
Nice.
Give us a thumbs up. Say hi again if you can hear us. Okay. And maybe just quickly summarize again what you were saying about teaching tips.
Yeah. So to make your classes more interactive when teaching in a language class, just make everything about the students talking to each other, right? So instead, if you give them a worksheet, instead of having them sit there and fill it out, give the worksheet to one of a pair of students and have them ask the questions, and the other person has to answer, and then they write it down, right? Because that forces it to be more interactive, and then they're actually practicing their language skills instead of just doing a worksheet, right? That's just one example, but again, there's so many things you can do with language that you can't do with math or history or something like that.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so we are also, as well as being live on YouTube, we're also live on Facebook, and we've got a question here from Jean-Luc Dufu. He says, "How to think in English? No more translating in your head." Now, we did talk a lot about this last week, so probably the best thing is to look back at last week's live stream, but. Yeah, what were the main? Can you remember what the main things we said were about that?
Oh man, there were so many things. Some highlights were, this isn't going to happen for everybody at the same time, so don't compare yourself to other people. Right? It's a process, and everyone's going to get this at their own pace. But it's not necessarily something that this is what you're working towards.
Yeah.
If you're spending however, if you're spending a lot of time, like I said, learning in a room by yourself, reading or listening or something like that, this is going to take longer, because that's not how your brain does language. If you want to be doing this, you want to go out and be speaking to people in English a lot, right? And the more you do that, your brain is literally making pathways in English instead of in French or whatever, right?
Yeah. So I don't think it's something that you work towards, but it's something that happens naturally.
Yes.
When you reach a certain level.
Definitely.
Okay. Another question here from Jack. Now, Jack's obviously been watching some of our videos. He says, pronunciation is physical. What do you mean by that? Sounds interesting. So this is something that it does sound interesting. Yeah, it is something that we say a lot when we're talking about pronunciation and how to improve your pronunciation. So what I mean by that is that, when you make a sound, you're doing it, by physically doing something with your teeth, your tongue, your lips, or your mouth or your vocal cords. The sound is produced physically. We think of it as just sound, but it has to come from somewhere, and it comes from something physical. So if you are having problems with a particular sound, it's always good to go back and think about and analyze what is the correct way physically to make that sound, and am I doing that right? Because often people have problems with particular sounds that perhaps they're not used to or not accustomed to using in their own language. So then it becomes very difficult to physically make those shapes. For example, a lot of Spanish speakers, especially in South America, struggle with the th sound, because you have to. They often say d, like the instead of saying the, they say d. And it's because they're not so accustomed to sticking their tongue out like that. The or think. So yeah, that's what we mean by pronunciation is physical. I have this thing because sometimes it's useful to show what we're doing with our mouth and lips.
I think your video is frozen. Do you want to hold up the big mouth again? Wait. Yeah, there you go. You're back. Oh no! Oh no! I think maybe we can't hear you, Colin. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for Colin, let's back up. I think we maybe missed a question from Susanta. I can't put it on the screen. Colin has that. But the question was, what does forgiving of mean? Okay. So now this is interesting because it doesn't mean really very much like to forgive someone for something, right? To forgive someone means, they did something bad to you and you say, oh, it's okay, I forgive you, and you're not angry about it. Forgiving of, oh, Colin must be back. Are you back?
Yeah, I think I'm back. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So forgiving of means that something is not as affected by that. So for instance, a building might be designed to be very resistant to winds or earthquakes or whatever. So it might be forgiving of certain mistakes that were made in building it because it was built to withstand that specifically. So small mistakes within that might not be as big of a problem. Some vehicles are more forgiving of a rougher road. Right, they can drive on a road that is not very well maintained because they were designed for it. Right? Does that make sense? I feel like I maybe didn't give the best examples there.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Let us know, Spencer, if that is helpful. So, question here is quite a long one. Not if it will fit on the screen, but I think it does. Yeah. Question from Frank. He says, "Hi, teachers. I remember you from
yes, welcome back, Frank.
A couple months ago, recently. So yeah, welcome back. Hi, teachers. I'm Frank from Venezuela. Which of the two sentences is used the most and means the same? Last bit of sunshine before home, or last sun before going home?" So, are you referring to
interesting question?
Bit of sunshine, or
the last
just
sun,
saying sun, yeah. Or
going home or headed home? Well,
yeah,
going home or heading home are both fine, right? I definitely think that the last bit of sunshine definitely is makes more sense and is more commonly used than the last sun. Sometimes you will hear people talk about, well, this is the last sun we're going to get, but that's kind of an edge case. Most of the time they're going to talk about the last sunlight or the last sunshine, right?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say last sun before going home. I don't think I would say that.
Yeah, the only time I can think of that I've heard that,
of sunshine.
Yeah, the only time I can think of having heard that is when they're talking about summer, right? Someone will say, well, this is the last sun we're going to get. Like, as short for this is the last sunny day we're going to get. But so again, like, I don't think that calling it, sun when you mean sunshine or sunlight or a sunny day or sunny weather, we don't usually say sun instead of that. We say sunshine or sunlight or sunny weather, right?
Yeah. But we do say I want to get some sun.
Yes, exactly.
Rather than some sunshine, which is probably the correct word. But we do sort of idiomatically say, I get some sun. It's been so dark this winter, sort of thing.
And so this idiomatic, like using sun instead of sunny weather or sunshine, does happen occasionally, but it's not as common as it is in a lot of languages. Yeah. It's a very good question.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so number one, there's a question here about the T sound or the sound. So, hi, sir. What's the rule of T, and in which situation is it silent or not pronounced? So,
I think this one is a really good example. This is a good example of a rule. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify here. When you put the slashes, that means you're using the phonetic transcription. In which case, it's never silent. Whereas so yeah, if you're using the phoneme, the T phoneme, it's always pronounced. Otherwise, there's no phoneme. If you're writing phonetic scripts, but if you're just talking about in the alphabet, if you're writing the letter T, then yeah, I guess there may be some cases where it's silent. When is a T silent, Tony?
So, for instance, in castle, right? So oftentimes T will be silent in the middle of, not oftentimes, occasionally, T will be silent in the middle of the word. This is a really good example of where I do not recommend learning all of the rules for this, because there's one simple thing that kind of makes sense. You don't pronounce a T when it's hard to pronounce in a word. Castle is harder to pronounce than castle.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you'll hear people say better or better instead of better, because it's just easier to pronounce. And so T's tend to soften or drop out entirely when they're in a word in such a way that it makes them hard to pronounce, but it's a common enough word that people still have to pronounce it, right? So there are some rules, but they're not something you really need to worry about. Like usually they'll be in the middle of a word, not at the end. However, there are also, kind of getting on to the next question, there are a lot of words where T's might be silent because they come from a different language. And so they're not pronounced because they're more pronounced according to the pronunciation rules of that other language, right?
Yeah. So there's two. So it's become the correct pronunciation. Can you hear me?
I think maybe we missed you for a bit there.
I was just saying, so there's two main rules there about when a T is silent. There's ones where the nature of the way the word is spelled, that it's just difficult to say the T, so it's become normal to not pronounce the T.
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of soft T, like you said, better, where we just it becomes very, very soft, and that's done in British English as it is in American English, right? This before in American, I think you make a more of a D instead of
a softer
whereas
D.
In British it's left out completely.
Yeah.
So I would this live stream is better than last week, whereas you would say this live stream is better than last week.
Yeah,
very slight difference, but
it's very slight difference. Yeah. So yeah, this is just a really good example of you do this pronunciation thing when it's easier, because that's how it actually works. Yeah. So now we've got a few questions here that are going to be very interesting, I think, because they have to do with history. Do we want to do AJ's question first?
Yeah, that's the one I was just looking at that one. Yeah. So AJ in Monaco, hello in Monaco. So,
Hello.
Tony, he's talking to you, Tony. He says, is learning or understanding Latin useful today? So that's an interesting question.
Yeah, and can we go ahead and see AKKC's question about French as well before I start answering these, because they're very closely related.
Let's see, where is it?
It's just right a couple above, right below number one's question, I think.
Oh yeah. Hey, hi guys. What percentage of the English vocabulary has its roots in French words? Is this because William the Conqueror was in power and had influence over people in 1066? Yeah.
So, and then later on we have Jack is talking about some of the history of Britain. And be careful, yeah, so...
Should I get that one up? Is that this one?
Yes. Yeah, it's talking about before William the Conqueror ruled England. Before that, it was Roman. Before that was Germans. That's not correct. However, you're close. So most of this is interesting because William the Conqueror didn't just rule England for a while. From there on out, for hundreds of years, England was being ruled by people who spoke French. There were many kings of England who did not speak English, who only spoke French. French was the language of the upper class in England for hundreds of years, right? So it's not just one king; it was an entire age where English was dominated by French. But the thing is, before that, there was no English. People in
There was lots of different dialects,
different languages. Yeah. Yes, not Latin. Mostly German or Scandinavian languages, because at that time, before William the Conqueror, Britain was controlled by different Scandinavian or German groups. And interestingly, William the Conqueror was actually also a Scandinavian, because the people who settled that part of France were actually from Scandinavia. So anyway, the way we get English is these French rulers who were ruling over England for hundreds of years. Slowly, that French worked its way down into the German and Scandinavian languages that were spoken there at the time, and that's where we get English as we know it today. It's a combination of French and those, German and Scandinavian languages that existed before. So yes, a huge number of English words have their roots in French. Also, a huge number have their roots in German or share roots with Scandinavian languages, Icelandic or Norse or Danish, something like that. And in fact, I joked with a friend of mine in Haiti who spoke French, who was trying to help me learn French, that every time he taught me a new French word, it was just another slightly different way of saying that same thing in English. That oftentimes the simplest way to say something in English will come from German, but because again that was the language of the common people. But the more complicated ways to say it come from French, right? So that's it's very common. Go ahead.
But I was going to say also sometimes we have adopted words from two different languages for the same thing, but then we use them in two different ways. So, for example, we have a cow. That's one word. I don't know. Is that from Greek? The word cow. But anyway, wherever it's from, then the other word beef, which is the food from a cow, is from French.
Yeah, so, cow would be from Saxon, from German.
Right.
Though it might not be related to, I don't know what the modern word in modern German is for cow, because there were a lot of different languages that were called German at the time. Yeah, exactly. And the reason for that is, the regular people had to take care of the cow, and so they called it a cow in their more German sounding thing. The upper class people ate the cow they ate the meat in feasts or whatever, and they called it in French beef. Both.
Yeah,
right.
But it's like the two words evolving to have their own more specific meaning.
Yes,
and there are more modern examples of the same thing happening, like the word apartment. That's more of an American word, whereas in English we say a flat. I live in a flat. But then we have more recently, I mean, this is just in the last few decades, this has happened, that the word apartment, although it used to be that a flat and apartment were the same thing, now an apartment is starting to be used to mean kind of a more luxurious dwelling in a block rather than a house.
Yes.
So because I think for a long time flats got a sort of negative connotation because there was housing, and so people didn't like to live in flats. So when they built more luxurious, they started to be used from the American. So it's the same thing.
And and then also, in addition to all this, there's also a lot of words in English that are just flat out French words that have become popular in English over the last few hundred years, and sometimes they're pronounced correctly. Like a good example is foyer. In the U.S., people pronounce that foyer. In Canada, they pronounce it foyer because it's a loan word, is what's called. It's a word that comes from French, but not like anciently. It hasn't been in English all this time, but some people just started saying it from French. And you'll get some of these like resume. There's no way you would pronounce that word that way if it were an English word. It would be resume. In fact, there is an English word, resume, right? It means to keep going at something, start back up, right? But resume is just a word that people have borrowed from French. It's not been part of English for hundreds of years. So yes, there are so many words in English that come from French. Now, to get to AJ's question, where does Latin come into this? Because they did speak Latin in what is now southern England 2,000 years ago, but that pretty much died out. Like that, so Latin didn't directly influence Old English that much. Its alphabet it did, but not so much the sounds or the words. But French comes from Latin. Spanish comes from Latin. Portuguese comes from Latin. Italian comes from Latin. Romanian, unsurprisingly, comes from Latin. So these languages are called the Romance languages. And they all descend from what was spoken by the Romans during the Roman Empire, right? Hence Romance, Roman, not like a romance novel. But so that Latin forms the roots for all of these. So learning Latin will make learning French, Spanish, Portuguese, or Romanian very easy. And because those words that they share in common are often usually in English as well, it definitely helps out. So there are so many words that have the same Latin root, and you can say, okay, I know this Latin root, therefore I understand this word in English, this word in French, this word in Spanish, this word in Portuguese, this word in Italian, because they all come from the same Latin root. They're all pronounced roughly the same. They all mean roughly the same thing. And that's really interesting and really cool that you can see these connections between these languages that go back to the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago. On top of that, Latin is also really useful in understanding scientific and medical terms because they're usually based in Latin. So, for instance, if you're really into, learning about chemistry or paleontology or medical stuff, learning Latin will help you understand 90% of the words that otherwise just look like crazy, insane combinations of letters that shouldn't go together. Yeah. When I was in high school, I took a course in Latin roots to help with vocabulary in English. And that's just been one of the things that I think helped me the most with vocabulary of anything that I've ever done in my life. Yeah.
Great. So we've got lots of chat in the chat, which is great. But not so many questions directly for us. Now, it's just got me thinking because I saw this, comment by AKKC saying, sort of apologizing for writing comments that aren't questions, and it's
oh, no worries.
No, but it's a shame. I was just thinking it'd be great if we can set something up in the future where people can chat to each other, because we have had people in the live stream chat wanting to reach out and find people in the same country that they can have conversation practice with. So I think there may be some things we can do to maybe make that happen.
Maybe we can put something on the website.
Yeah, or yeah, we'll definitely watch this space. So the situation is at the moment, Tony and I are both very, very busy. We're not working on English Language Club full time. We're just doing it when we can. And this month in particular, I'm very, very busy with other things. But I am going to try and squeeze in these live streams. But from January, we're going to be putting a lot more time into English Language Club things. So definitely join the mailing list and stay in touch if you want to be involved in those things when we do them. And we do hope they will be exciting and useful for you. So, yeah. Let's see. What about Welsh? Jack says, what about Welsh? And do the Scots have their own language? So, yeah, well, Wales has its own language, which is still used. There are a lot of people who speak Welsh.
And it's not connected to French or German or Latin or any of the others. It's just its own thing.
Yeah. But I think Scotland and does, or it has its own language, but it's not used so much in
as Welsh,
as Welsh. Welsh, if you go to Wales, you'll see signposts and things are all in the two languages, both English and Welsh, and any sort of government communication you can request to have it in Welsh if that's what you prefer. Whereas I don't think that's the case with Scottish or Gaelic languages.
Yes. There's also another one in the UK on the Isle of Man, sorry. They have their own language as well. I can never remember how to pronounce the name of the language because it's a bit odd. But it's not pronounced that way, though. That's how it's spelled, right?
Oh, right.
But I don't think it's pronounced that way. So there is another. So all of these are they were just like when the Germans and various Scandinavian and the Normans came in. These people just didn't get conquered, and so they kept their own language for hundreds of years longer until they were mostly later conquered by by England. But hundreds of years later, after English had already become a thing, and there
would have probably been dozens of other languages because people didn't travel around so much. So the way that people spoke in London would have been very different to how people spoke in Cornwall. I mean, it still is now. There's very distinct accents, but they would have been different languages long enough ago.
Cornish is very similar to what they speak in Brittany, I believe. Like there is an old language, Cornish, and I don't know if it's still if there's anyone who still speaks it, but it's very similar to what's spoken in Brittany and France.
Right.
Because they were part of the same.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So they don't speak French in Brittany?
I mean, they do, but they have, just like in Wales, like they have their own native, like their local language that dates back, that's older than French. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. I'm just going to quickly jump to number one's question, and we will go back to some of the other ones. It says, do you have any plan to upload new videos on YouTube? Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
We've been writing some, and from January we're hoping to have more of a upload schedule. So especially in January, we're hoping to do more than one a week, and then after that, hopefully we can continue to do more than one a week. It all depends. We're at this point now where we are both really hoping that we can go full time working on English Language Club. But we're nowhere near the point where we can do that yet. But that's looking like a realistic goal. So we're working towards that. And when we start doing that, we'll probably do at least 2 or 3 a week, plus the live stream, plus Zoom calls for members, maybe more than one live stream. That's the kind of schedule we're hoping to do. Plus maybe some other resources on the website and things. So great. So Yelena just said, hello, I would like to become a paid member, but I don't have a button to join. Do you have restrictions, or could this be an issue on my side? I'm really bad at YouTube. Yeah, that's interesting. So we were talking about this last week. Yeah, I think it might be a restriction in your country, or maybe to do with type of account you have, or based on your age or something like that. I'm not sure. I wonder whether we can also set up something on the website that would give access to the Zoom calls and things like that. These are all things, that we will think about in the new year. So yeah, thank you so much for being willing to support us. I really appreciate that. That is unfortunate that you can't join that.
Yeah.
But hopefully we will be able to sort something out.
Yes.
Okay. We got another little question from Susanta. She says, I heard a phrase, welcome along. Why did they say along? To welcome along. So to welcome along.
Like this sounds familiar, but not quite right.
I mean, so along normally means to sort of continue something that's already started. So to welcome someone along, to welcome can mean to encourage as well as to sort of greet someone. So to welcome someone along, maybe to encourage them through a process, through a course, maybe.
It's kind of a combination of That's the only thing I can think of, but I can't recall.
Exactly. Can you tell us more about the context, Susanta? That might be helpful. So we might come back to that. Let's see. AKKC says walk the road or walk along the road. Walk the road.
Or walk along the road.
Or walk along the road. So I think both are correct under certain circumstances.
Right. So walk the road implies more of the destination, right? You're going wherever the road is going. Walk on the road is just, like as opposed to walking on the pavement or the sidewalk, right? You're saying, oh, I'm walking on the road. Walking along the road is more casual, though. It doesn't say that you're going anywhere. You're just following the road.
Right, but it could be someone giving directions, saying walk along the road until you get to the pub, then turn left, something like that. But walk the road. Walk on the road. So walk on the road is the question. Walk on the road. Well, when you're saying walk on the road, you're saying make sure you walk on the road as opposed to walking on the pavement.
So that's a bit of an odd grass. Like sometimes I'll say, when I go for a walk in the neighborhood here, there are streets that have a sidewalk, a pavement, but only on one side of the road. So sometimes we'll just walk on the road, right? So that's instead of walking beside the road. So those are specific things. Yeah, that's more specific. Like you're talking about actually being in the middle of the road.
Yeah. Okay, going back to Susanta's question, she says, it was an interview on the BBC and the host welcomed a person by saying, welcome along. Okay, so...
Yeah, I've never heard that.
I mean, I can imagine that. I can imagine... Yeah, I can imagine somebody saying that. Welcome along to this person. Yeah. It's strange, though. It's strange.
It's a bit unusual.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I certainly can't imagine that being said in American English, but it might be possible in British English.
Yeah. So let's see. Have we got any other questions?
We've got a few. Let's see. I think we missed one up earlier. Ricardo asked, is there any website or tool to check our pronunciation? That's quite far up there near the question about Latin. So there are a number of apps that I know that have this in the past, like where they will, when they're quizzing you, they'll let you actually speak. I haven't used them extensively. So that is a tricky one. There are some. I don't know of any individually, but not like a website that I'm aware of. They would all be like in an app, like a learning English app or a learning another language app, something like that. And it wouldn't be just for anything. It would be for specific things. One thing that you can do is you can try to use Google Voice to say something and see if it understood you. That can be one thing, but yeah, otherwise
the trouble with that is I think it learns. It learns.
Right. Yeah, you can.
It learns your mistakes, and then you keep making the mistake, which is what a lot of people will do in English.
Exactly the problem. It is so important, even if you have access to an app that will do it. It is so important to actually talk to people who speak the language, that are native speakers in the language. You can't always do it, and it's not always easy to do, but again, like we talked about last week, find online communities where people are talking to each other, a Discord or something else, and listen in and talk and practice your English that way. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so there's a question now from Lap, who says, what's the differences of on time and in time? So on time and in time. So essentially they mean the same thing, like arriving punctually. But so what is the difference there to be on time or in time?
So I mean, what they mean, the core meaning difference is that on time is for something starting, in time is for something ending. So if you finish something before a deadline, you finished it in time. If you finish something at the beginning of the next stage, you finished it on time. So there, it could be the same thing. But for instance, you wouldn't usually say, I got there in time for the party. You could, but usually you'd say, you got there on time, because that's the party is beginning, right?
Yeah.
Or we finished our meal in time to leave to go see the movie, because you're talking about something ending. But it's a bit more, it's not.
I think
exactly the case.
One thing that confuses that is you can often say, make sure you arrive in time, but because then it's you're still talking about the end of something, but you're talking about the ending of your arrival. Being in time.
At least in American English, you wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say, make sure you arrive in time. You would say, you arrive on time.
Yeah, more like say on time.
You would arrive. Make sure you arrive in time to sit down before things start, because then you're talking about an activity that has to end before everything starts, right? But if you're just talking about an event, you would just say arrive on time. Make sure you arrive on time for an event.
So that's a really interesting question.
It's a good example of these ones where there's probably you could theoretically memorize a list of situations where you use one or the other, but it's probably not worth it. Understanding the basic meaning of when you use one or the other, and then actually practicing. These are rules that it would be really hard and a waste of time to force your brain to memorize them. But if you go out and you use English enough and you hear people say these things, your brain will learn these rules without you having to ever understand them. Your brain will just pick up on it. That's how it works.
Yeah. Great. So are there any other questions you're aware of, Tony, that I've missed or that we've missed?
Susanta asks, we say walk down the road. And yes, we do say that a lot.
Well, I think that's a reference to the previous question we had about on the road. So walk down the road. So down the road is
more common than along the road, for sure. Yeah. And on the road, again, that's not the same thing at all. It's but so walk down.
You can say that my house is just down the road on the left. So it can refer to a destination, but along the road is not really a destination. It's like you walk along the road. It doesn't, and you keep doing that until you get to the end of the road, which may not necessarily be the end of the journey. Great. Okay, so it's been interesting, great talking to you all today. The chat's getting more and more busy, and it's getting harder and harder to track where we've got to in there for the questions and things. So which is great. It means more people are watching, which is really great. So if it is your first time, you're very, very welcome. And please, give us a thumbs up if you're watching for the first time and you have found this useful. We do try to do this every Tuesday at 2:00 UK time. We've done it. I think we haven't missed a week since March. I think when we started doing these, and we are planning to do these right through at least till the end of. Well, definitely to the end of January and probably beyond that as well. So please join us next week, and then and stay tuned because in January we've got a lot more interesting things coming out. If you're not aware, our course Inside English, which is all about the tenses, really focusing on tenses and how sentences are actually structured and how tense works basically is what that course is all about. So we're launching that at the beginning of January. So we're going to be making a lot more content around that. So thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.